Good evening. The title of tonight's Dharma talk might be a little confusing, but it's intentions. I'm always talking about, often saying, concentrate on your intention and don't look for the results. And so the title is Intentions. Was it result?
Intentions, results.
Results. So it's what are the results? And there will very likely be results out of any kind of intention, especially the practical ones. I intend to weed the garden. So we're going to get some kind of a completion out of that. Whereas the intention to see your true nature, the intention to train your mind, may not be quite so forthcoming with results, or at least perhaps the results that you expect. So the idea when I say to focus on your intent, your intention to save all beings, your intention to be with all things, your intention to see the truth, see the ultimate truth. If we emphasize too much on how are we doing and are we getting anywhere, trying to look for some kind of stages or some kind of gradual improvement, or this tends to fall in the category of spiritual materialism, or using spiritual practices to get ahead, get better, improve, be more this or more and less that. And it is not that that won't occur. What I'm saying is, if we put our intention, if we take the energy that's going into the intention and begin to put our energy into trying to look ahead, trying to see how are we doing, are we improving, are we doing better, then what we're doing is making assumptions about coming to some kind of conclusion about what it is that we're even endeavoring to do. So we take some of that energy away from the intention and put it on looking for results, which is not exactly the spiritual path. So fundamentally, just the idea of emphasizing your intention to train your mind, your intention to get to the cushion, your intention to study, returning to the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. If that structure is something that you feel drawn to, that helps inspire you to want to see what it is that the ego mind, the self-centered mind, the greedy mind, the angry mind, the jealous mind, envious mind is taken up with, then the intention should get your energy, should get your input, should get your sincerity and your earnestness. And as we all know, if you've been practicing for a while, if you've been alive for a while as a human, you know that the causes and conditions that affect our emotions, our feelings around anything that's occurring are extremely unpredictable and quite often make no sense at all. Things might be going very well, you're doing very good, you're practicing a lot, and yet your emotional state or your ability to work with any given negativity, any of the kleshas, passion, aggression, ignorance, pride, jealousy, envy, and so on. Sometimes you're not doing so well in that area, and yet you feel like you're practicing, you feel like you're meditating a lot, you feel like you're studying, And yet there's these emotions or feelings that come up, and just like bad weather coming from nowhere. And this tends to cut into the intention to see the truth. And we start to have doubts. We start to wonder that perhaps what we're doing isn't appropriate, or maybe we should do something else. I can say a few more words about that, but it might be good to interact with people around this particular topic. When
you're bowing. So when we have those bad weather emotions arise and start to think about, well, maybe we'd be better off doing something else, is there a way to intercede on that to bring back perhaps some kind of sanity to a very highly charged situation? Bowing.
There may be, and also there may not be, because the dependent origination that is so difficult to understand, even get into view, is operating in ways that are completely out of sight and may never come into view. May never know the direct cause for any given thunderstorm, any given tornado, or emotional feeling outburst or whatever. The ego mind, the self-centered mind, cannot handle the openness that comes with something like having a negative feeling and having no idea at all what that's about. So the tendency is to want to go to blame something, blame the past, blame the Buddha, blame your lack of mind training or lack of discipline. Blame, blame, blame. Doesn't mean that you couldn't, when negativity arises, you couldn't work with that in a way that conceptually. If you read Tisha's 7 Points of Mind Training, all the 59 slogans in there, a lot of those relative bodhicitta tend to give you suggestions on how to work with negativity. Also, it might be good to not necessarily go right back to the cushion and try to meditate so that you'll feel better necessarily. It might be maybe better not to meditate at all, maybe to stop for a while. Specific question?
I'm just thinking about something you said the other day about and you use the image of the bad weather, or like it's like waking up from a nightmare, because it's been my experience that when one of these intense emotions arise and may last, but then they're gone, and I'd kind of look back and say, well, what was that about? But at the time I'm suffering deeply in it, it feels like there could be some dire consequences if I were to take action.
No.
And so it's just a matter of, during those times of intensity, I'm looking for a lifeline. What can some kind of a rope to grab onto or something.
So I think it's, to use the word I'm starting to wear out, but I think it's important to use, very situational. That may be a time when you could return to some kind of a creation completion practice, a white Tara practice, or a mantra. There's possibility that could help somehow give you some kind of maybe not stability right away, but clarity about the nature of the confusion, that it's something that you're making up. And if there might be something there that is triggering something that hasn't been seen deeply. And so rather than go with the negative feeling of that arising, you could look at that as what the word we used as a dharma gate. This negativity, you could say that to yourself. You could say, I'm going to relate to this as a dharma gate. More.
I don't know. Thank you.
Any further questions? Shoot.
I think you said the causes or the cause may never come into view.
Perhaps not.
It seems like it's a difficult situation that I am not at all clear about. But it feels like it's just gone under the surface, and I fear that it's going to rise up with the same intensity in some other place. If there was some clarity about that, could it still arise with the same intensity?
Could. So the rising of the intensity of whatever it may be, whether it's anger or resentment or whatever may show up, the issue that always hooks us is we think there's somebody who that shouldn't be happening to, rather than to see that the fundamental difficulty there is the identity that I'm somebody who's having this emotion, rather than the emotion is just dependently arisen. It's causes and conditions that come and go. This happened, that happened, then this happened. Once this happens, then that occurs. This happens, that occurs. That kind of shifting around. And rather than actually see deeply that there's no one, there's no solid entity called me. And when that starts to get, that area starts to get insecure, it looks for something to validate. It looks for an emotion or a feeling. I'm the one who is being offended or put upon, or I'm the one who's being cheated out of what I need or what I want. And it's the confusion and the persistence of that situation comes from trying to push that away, or trying to validate, say the reason this is happening is because of her or him or what they said or what I did. It doesn't matter if it's someone else you're blaming or blaming yourself. It tends to perpetuate that. So the fundamental thing that needs to be seen is there is no solid me. Go ahead.
If the causes may never come into view, how is there a resolution, or how does that lose its fuel?
So the way I talk about this is just receive. If you have emotions coming up in the mind stream, just receive them. And notice, be aware when the way you try to wrestle with that or try to make that go away, or blame someone or blame yourself or find some attribution for that. And it is dependently arisen. This thought caused that, this pushed on that, this pushed on that, this showed up, then this happened, and then 1,500 other things all came together at the same time and caused this particular appearance. But there's no actual identity there. There's no one who's experienced. There is experience. There is the emotion. There is the negativity. But there's no solid being there called me. That doesn't mean that the emotion is less. The emotion could be extremely powerful.
There's a question from Naveed in Iran.
Naveed.
Does our true nature function in the same space that thoughts arise? Bowing.
The way you're asking the question, I would say yes to that, but it's not actually functioning in the same sense as some aspect that is functioning. It is more like a receiver rather than something is being produced. There's no one particularly receiving, but there's no one objecting to that or agreeing with that. Further question around that, if you can tell me or say, if you come up with a question that gets us both closer to what it is that you want to know, And maybe you feel like you made that clear. If you made that clear, then that's my response. Oh,
Nicole Downing, can we fool ourselves with our intentions?
sure. This is why we have intentions. This is why we have all these forms. This is why we chant the sutras, chant the Heart Sutra over and over and over again. Why we continue to return to the three jewels, to the teacher, the teaching, the community, over and over and over again, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, until we eventually see what this is fundamentally. And then we won't be too concerned about any kind of so-called evidence that shows up that we're not getting anywhere or we're fooling ourselves. More?
In that process, do we know that we're fooling ourselves?
Well, if you
Or
know
when-
you're fooling yourself, then you probably wouldn't continue. If you really saw that would just lose the energy. Self-deception probably would just lose its energy. But the way dependent origination works, there's no guarantee of anything. There's no guarantee that that same kind of difficulty, however it may be, may suddenly arise again. And then self-centered mind will start to make hay out of that. Oh, I must be wrong. This is coming back. Here I go again. Those kind of things. Whereas liberation doesn't add anything up. It doesn't take something and make it into something else. You're actually free of the very things that are flowing.
Can we? I'm not sure how to word it. Can we work with an intention, with the desire of wanting to be sincere about it?
The desire to be sincere goes a long ways. If that's there, then there's going to be an intention to try to see how we're doing, if we are covering things up, if we are hiding out. So, and we use the forums. If we have a teacher, then we listen to the teacher. If we have a teaching, we read, study, discuss the teaching, whatever it is we're working on with the sangha, interact with the sangha, other people in the community who are also endeavoring to see the truth themselves, for themselves. Another question? Shoka.
Sokuzan, if we have an intention to see what is true and we're not looking for the result, then can that intention be obstructed?
Well, anything that has that quality of intention, has a forward movement, can probably run into issues in the relative sense. But if the energy is going in to see what this is, then there's an intention to keep that vow. I vow to be with all things. And just keep returning to it. And part of that is feeling like you're not able to do that. Feeling like there's some kind of failure happening there. This is ego. This is a self-centeredness showing up. And it tends to show up more and more as the intention, when there's that intention, because it is something that can't really be accomplished. And why? It's already the case. It already is the great perfection. But we have to start somewhere. So we start with a very karma. We were dealt, so to speak, if we want to use that kind of a metaphor for it, the very thing that gave us our blue eyes, our white skin, our brown skin, our stature, our health situation, the very thing that shows up there. We receive that as it is and work with that. If we're free and well favored, we've somehow managed to stumble into the teachings of the Buddha, a way of understanding our human life that is profound and vast, rather than just simple and cause and effect, success and failure, right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, life and death, relative truth. Yeah.
Shokubang, what's the failure of ego when we're intending?
I'm not sure. It's pretty obvious what it is.
Shokubang, if we're intending to see something and we feel as though we're failing, then is that an intention with an outcome or a result?
Could be. We feel like we're failing, so there's the result. But that very feeling is seems to be necessary for that to occur, so that the self-centeredness, the ego, so that we continue to look at that concoction we call me and my success, me and my failures, me and my world. How am I doing? Am I getting anywhere? Am I somehow fulfilling the bodhisattva ideal? Just a way of setting up standards. It's all over the place. We can't help but do that. We're going to do that to some extent, no matter what. But if we put our intention on the, if we put our awareness on the intention, then it's very situational. It's very simple. Return to the cushion. Return to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. When you're doing prostration practice, it's just intention. You're not necessarily looking up to see if the teacher's approving of you.
Divine, how can our intention help us in when we feel like emotions, like we're failing by being overcome by our emotions, like we're not being able to be with all things because of our emotions?
That's also awareness. Just observe that. Good question. Because that's where it kind of catches up with us. We're doing this, we're practicing. We've been maybe practicing for years, and we start to be overcome by a very simple situation where we get triggered somehow. Maybe it's a hidden area, and we start to feel like we're losing out, we're losing ground, we're misunderstanding, we're flooded with negativity. Just continue. Just return to the intention in the midst of the negativity, which doesn't mean abandon the negativity and try to use the intention to cover up the negativity. Do it right in the negativity. It's as if you were to say, I don't care if this negativity ever goes away. I'm on this path and I'm going up this mountain, no matter what. Remember that one? No matter what, I'm going to do this no matter what. Nothing can stop me. This is not, might look like some kind of transcendental bullheadedness, but it's just an intention. It does have some stability in the intention and returning to that. I take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, take refuge in the Sangha, those kinds of things. And then possibly prostration practice, possibly just returning to the cushion, return to the teachings, those concepts that help us understand, like the five skandhas, form, feeling, perception, concept, and consciousness, do not add up to a person. They're there, and they're an aspect of personhood: the body, form, feeling, perception, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, thinking, perceptions, concepts, the thinking process, consciousness, the six sense fields and their objects, come together and say, I'm here, this is me, I'm somebody, I'm doing well, I'm not doing so well, I'm being taken advantage of, I'm losing my energy, I'm losing my insight. I had some insight, but now it's going away. There's no solid being there at all. It's unreal. But
Wonderful. So if you still believe in a solid being, are you saying just to feel the intense emotions and continue to act through our body, our intention?
continue to receive, continue to, whatever your practice is, continue to practice. And this is why I say it's about the intention, not about what you're looking for. Even though there's the intention to see the truth, you're not looking for your version of the truth to see, or your version of success, or your version of enlightenment. Enlightenment is described in different ways. Anuttara samyak sambodhi, complete unexcelled enlightenment or liberation. So, well, what are we going to do with that? The important thing is to intend rather than look to see if there's some kind of signals that I might be more realized, or I might be getting more realized, or more clear, more. Materialism. More?
Wonderful. It seems like in those moments when you weather this emotional storm, that the intention gets stronger. Is that possible?
I think so. In other words, you stay with that and you notice that it starts to ebb. So the negativity starts to slow down. Is that what you're saying? And you just keep going. And there doesn't seem to be maybe a little bit of a credential we might get from that, but not so much that it's going to be a hindrance. And just return to the three jewels, return to your connection with the teaching, whatever teaching that may be. Just some teachings, the concepts that are there are so powerful that you can just go and just read that conceptual structure. Vasubandhu's 30 verses is one of those that you can go, there's a certain few verses towards the end that if you read those, that understanding enters into your entire being, but specifically into the fourth skandha, the thinking process, the conceptual area, and you see that it's actually describing liberation in concepts. And if for some people that might be not so helpful, and for others it's extremely helpful to return to that, return to the Dharma, return to a way that the Dharma has been characterized that is powerful to you personally. Sometimes reading Dogen, who seems to talk out of both sides of his mouth. He talks relative truth and absolute truth at the same time.
Shokabang, is it a form of greed to think that what's arising in our mind stream belongs to us?
Well, it could be. Anytime there's attachment and demand for something, there's some kind of greediness or wanting something. But you could even say that just wanting to feel secure has a form of attachment or greed to it. But usually what we're talking about with greed is just intense desire for everything we can get our hands on or get our claws into. Materialism. On the spiritual path, that shows up as just wanting results, wanting to be more knowledgeable than others, more insightful than others, or more insightful than we were 3 weeks ago. More.
Shokabang, does it get easier to
No, doesn't get easier at all. And that you won't, the way I sometimes say, you won't mind because your understanding about what the situation is has gone beyond the success and failure part of it, the polarized part of it. So you understand that there's a fundamental, this sometimes is talked about as disappointment. There's a fundamental understanding that can feel disappointing because your idea of what was going to happen as you practice, you've been practicing for years, maybe decades, and you see that is not, you're not going to get that kind of result.
Shokubang, it seems like I have an idea that at some point my attention will turn away from what's arising to who it's arising for. Is that going to, does that happen?
Good. Looking at the identity, you mean? Is there anyone is actually experiencing this? What do you think? Is there?
Shokubang, it just, the way that you've been talking about intention tonight, it seems like I look for the intention and the success or the failure of it, and I miss the examination of who is intending or what is intending. So it seems like I just get lost in what's arising.
I don't see any problem. Don't you,
Question from Lydia.
Lydia?
Is prayer a form of mind training?
Yes.
She has a follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
What should my intention be during prayer?
Well, I'm very biased in this area. I would say save all beings. Supplicate. Pray for others. Not that you couldn't pray for yourself also. Pray for yourself so you can continue to work for benefit of others. Right?
Naveed has a follow-up from earlier.
Good.
I don't know how to be clear about the question. I feel everything has a quality of thoughts to itself. Everything in the real world comes and goes as the thoughts come and go. Is this right?
Yeah, it's just what you're describing here is awareness. And if just your description is just something arises in the mind stream, we're just aware of that. It's when we add on, we fixate on it, we want to crowd something out or get more of something. We have an agenda around what's happening in the mind. And it might show up as positive, negative, or neutral, passion, aggression, and ignorance. And then we want to do something with that. So it's the extra push or shove or pull or shutting down that makes it spin, that makes it more and more difficult. But what you're describing, the way you're describing, is just watch what moves. And you don't have to create some kind of artificial indifference to everything. Like, well, I don't really care about anything. You won't have a statement like that. It begins to arise in the form of just whatever's arising that's exactly what it is, as it is, rather than interpretations, elaborations about that. Any further questions? Nishikai.
Nishikabang, is an intention a production?
To some extent, as we're intending, we have an intention to clarify, an intention to get to the cushion, an intention to practice the dharma. So there's some production going on there. We're producing something based on possibly going around in circles and seeing that the way we've been living our life is not working so well. So we run into a situation where someone, or we run into the whole tradition, not only someone, but the Buddha's dharma down through the centuries. We stumble into that and we see this might be a good way to work with this rather than just continue to chase things around and try to get somewhere or make a lot of money or become something else more. Okay. Other questions? Suzanne.
Geez, I'm knowing, if we see ourselves looking for results, is it helpful to return to the intention?
You could. Good. You want to give me an example? Think of something you really want. You didn't get it. So you could whine about that. You could blame somebody. You could blame yourself. Or you could also return to the intention to be with all things, save all beings. That can show up as just not agreeing, objecting to, or ignoring anything. Just be with all things. Even the be part is be is gone because that intention has been the repetition there. Eventually there's nothing to do. Nothing else is showing up or occurring, no matter what arises in the mind stream, no matter if negativity arises from whatever particular kaleidoscope you've just bumped into.
Geez, I'm knowing. It seems like there's a different quality to returning to the attention than just observing that we're looking for a result. Are those two different things?
Say more.
It seems like conceptually I could think of just observing the desire for the result as being with all things, but it seems less active than returning to the result of being with all things.
So a little of each. Return and also don't necessarily abandon anything, is what I'm hearing you ask about. So don't abandon to get to back to the intention. If it's arising, receive it. That's intention also. I intend to receive whatever shows up in my mind stream. No more war. No more agreeing. No more disagreeing. And these may sound like standards, and to some extent maybe they could be, but they won't hold steady enough to be standards because they're very simple things. Just whatever shows up, receive. If it goes away and leaves, receive that. You see that it's leaving. Very difficult to do. As long as there's a solid being who's tied into success, or a solid being who is bemoaning failure. I might be able to teach this, but I can't do this. Go ahead.
Shubhang, how do we return to an intention when it feels like we don't have any sort of connection or desire to do that at that moment?
Just do the best you can with it. It's just like an unruly child. You're just doing the best you can to work with it. But you can't, you can't go overboard and just make it all about having success with making them mind or making them understand. Just do the best you can with it. Insofar as you can, meet it where it's at. Meet your own mind stream where it's at, right in the midst of the crap, rather than have some kind of idea about how to cover it up or how to reduce the energy of that by blaming someone, something, including yourself. I sometimes say be the negativity that you're endeavoring to get rid of or figure out or deconstruct or delaminate, some way of getting that to stop. Painful, can be extremely painful.
If we are the unruly child, how do we work with ourselves?
Give yourself a good whipping. No, that's a good question. I would just say, just practice. Get yourself to the cushion. Practice receiving. If the unruliness that shows up as your particular karma or anyone's particular eye color or stature or tendency to have that kind of emotion, just do the best you can. Just return to it. Return to the cushion so you can train the mind to just receive. All Shikantaza is it's not about having a wonderful Kensho experience of seeing the nature of reality as not separate, or you're somehow a transcendent being. It's rather just seeing that everything is dependent on everything else for its apparent singularity. We begin to see that, and we see that by not pushing on something that's coming towards us, not grasping something that's going away from us, and not shutting down on something that is in our face or is causing some kind of disturbance, shutting it out, distracting ourselves away from it by just receive. And also not particularly receiving it and getting a credential of how good we're receiving. This is going into relative truth, the cause and effect situation. Going into, am I getting anywhere? Am I getting anywhere? There's nowhere to get. Sir.
Human bowing. Going into the holidays, what kind of intention can we offer our families? And I'm thinking in particular something different than meaning well, you know, in the relative sense.
So say a little bit, personalize it a little bit more, so I'm not stuck with just a kind of a general holiday greeting.
I started thinking about parents intending to do something for their children, to teach them something, but in general for people that we're working with or talking to that we may not see very often, what kind of attention or intention can we give them?
You're talking about buying me something? So give them your attention. Listen to them. How are they? How are you doing? Listen, and also give them the opportunity to ask you about how you're doing, so you can tell them. But just tell them. Don't tell them more than they want to hear. I'm not sure if I'm tracking what you're asking about. I think it's just a very simple situation of listening to people, listening to others, especially people who have no mind training at all, who totally believe in their thoughts and their emotions. Whereas someone who has been practicing this for a while, you may still be confused by thought patterns and emotions and so on, but there's some kind of understanding beginning to arise that this is unreal. All of these emotions and feelings are dependently risen, so they're real in the sense that, they show up, but they're unreal in the sense that they have there's nothing solid there for that. It's dependently risen. It's dependent on everything else for its appearance. More specific?
That was what I was.
I think just listening to people, being just receiving people where they're at. If you've been spending some time, which I know you have, sitting down and receiving your own disturbances, your own thought patterns, your own emotions coming and going, and you've been doing that for a few years, which I know you have, then it's that same kind of attitude. You don't have to be practicing shikantaza, zazen. You're actually with them, with your hand gestures and with theirs, and your tone of voice. You're receiving that, and you're perhaps even responding to them, not to particularly validate them, but just to be with them. It's a simple thing, very difficult to do when we're struggling and fighting with our own ideas, our own mind stream, our own politics of experience that are rising in our own mind, that are due to causes and conditions that brought us into this realm, and all of the various things we're dealing with as far as the society we're in, the culture we're in, our families and their considerations about what we're doing, what we're not doing that they think we should be doing. More?
Human bowing. kind of along the same lines, when we encounter someone who's trying to press their political view on us, how do we receive that in the same way?
It's very situational, so there may be times when you're not going to do that. But it could be, generally speaking, I would say, yes, just listen to what people are saying. There's so much chaos in that area. You can just receive it. It doesn't have to be, if you're receiving it, they're probably, and you're just receiving, they're going to find out what your position is on it by asking you. And you can just say, oh, but don't necessarily agree with that. Or you could say, I'm not sure about that. That might be all you'd need to do, rather than come back and say, you're full of it. You need to see a psychiatrist soon. Here, there's one. Go see mine. Of course, you're not going to do that. You're going to, again, it's situational. It depends on who it is. Especially sometimes in our own family, we have people in our own family that it's kind of astounding that they can be intelligent people in our family. So intelligent, yet who are completely fooled by just politics and all the ideas and opinions and so on that are floating around in the world. So we don't want to make it any worse. And then, of course, the thing is, people say, well, you have to be direct. You can't let people get away with thinking that you agree with them or something. So it gets pretty sticky sometimes. But the most important thing you can do, as far as I'm concerned, and the way I see it, and what I've been looking at myself for a while, train your mind so that you may run into confusion in others and in your own mind, but you're not going to make it any worse. Even in your own mind, you're having negative feelings, negative stuff comes up, that you're not going to actually push that down or push that away by blaming. Even though someone actually is doing something that is triggering emotions in your own mind stream that are difficult, still you see it clearly enough that you know that is your feeling. I'm not talking about ego feeling. I'm talking about in your particular, this whole matrix we call consciousness. That's occurring in your mind stream and happen to be triggered by someone, but no one's to blame for anything. It just looks like it. Further questions? Yes.
Another question from Naveed.
Yes.
I rarely find myself talking to myself in my head, but most of the time I'm talking to others in my head. How is it different from talking to yourself?
Probably pretty similar to that. I'm not sure what it is you want to know. I mean, if I could say, well, Naveed, if you're talking to others, then it's actually talking to others. But if it's talking to yourself, then you're talking to yourself. That's not going to be helpful. But I could say, when you're talking to others, you're talking to your idea of others. You really don't know others. The most important thing for you to understand about what I just said is there aren't any others. But that's not a belief. It's not a conclusion. It's a deep understanding. And when you're talking to yourself, you're talking to your idea of yourself, also a construct. The whole situation of identity is a big misunderstanding. Mistaken identity here, mistaken identity out here. We have war after war after war. Peace after peace after peace. But it's also relative peace that means it's setting the scene for war. I say, many times I'll say it again, don't go to war, don't go to peace. Don't take any position. Unless there's causes and conditions that arise in such a way that you need to, like with the Kyun, you're talking to somebody who's got a strong position, you might have to be positional for that. With that person, to be with that person, you might have to be positional temporarily. And then they walk away and the whole thing collapses. Sorry to get upset. You can do that. Go ahead.
A question from Esther.
Esther Boleyn. Hello, Esther. Haven't heard from you in a while. You must have a whole string of questions.
So far, just two. Are habits of thought which we notice and observe more likely to pass or dissolve? Do the thought patterns we cannot observe tend to be more persistent in sticking around?
I'm following the way you're asking the question, and I think it's more complicated than that. I think it's more because you're actually starting to define the difference in the way those are showing up. So if I could tell you, how would that help you? If I could say, oh, you're correct, or this is not correct, how would that fundamentally help? The important thing is just to look at it, be aware of whatever's coming. And if you add to it or subtract from it, just be aware of that. Don't necessarily manufacture some kind of person who is, even though it says be with all things, manufacture some kind of credential of I'm just being with all things. Or I'm just accepting everything. I don't even say just accept. You have another question?
Question from Udi, Connecticut. When we receive, are we always receiving our projection?
Yes. We are. We receive when somebody is functioning in a certain way that's either neutral or difficult or easygoing. It's always our idea about what's happening there that we're receiving, not just that situation on its own without anything else. We're receiving our idea of that. Are there any questions on Zoom? Shisho.
Tishabang, following up on Udi's question, is
Yes.
it possible ever to receive something that is not our projection? Bye.
Pretty much everything that's coming our way is loaded with some kind of lamination of otherness, of something we have ideas about what that is. If you receive what is actually there, nothing has even been received because you're not separate from that. More? You can stop smiling now, Chisho.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Shogabang, one time I had asked you a question and you responded talking about an intention, and you said, return to the intention and notice that every time you do that, something changes. What is it that's changing whenever we return to an intention?
Your presumptions about and preconceptions and about what intention actually is. And not only what intention actually is, but that particular intention, what that is. Right.
Shogabang, can we ever intend the same thing twice?
How's it look to you?
Shogabang, I guess with the way that you just responded to me, it seems like there's an idea that an intention is one thing that is continuous.
What do you think? That's the Sokukoji shrug. We have a mudra here, it's like, what do you want to know?
Is there ever an intention that is continuous?
If it's contrasted with one that's discontinuous, yes. I'm glad I was able to help you with that.
Chukwang, I was just thinking that I see how that question's not helpful.
Yeah. That's the other thing I highly recommend that all of you ask really helpful questions. Help the old man out here. Help out the elderly. Yes.
Esther says, I think I understand a little, thank you. And Udi has another question.
Udi,
What is the relationship between our projection and pure appearance? Is pure appearance a special kind of appearance? Is all appearance pure?
it's no appearance at all. It's nothing appears. That's why it's pure. Further.
Divine, do you mind repeating what the talk title is pointing at? Intentions, results?
Intentions is was it possessive? The intentions results. So do I mind doing saying what that refers to?
Mm-hmm.
You can't find them. The intentions result. You can find the intention, but if you can find the intentions results, we're right back to spiritual materialism. We're doing something to get something. And so, but what we're talking about here is just the intention to see the truth. We don't know what the truth is, particularly what the ultimate truth is, but we intend to see what is fundamentally true. And we might have to go through quite a labyrinth of relative constructs in order to see what that is fundamentally. Or yeah, Junshu came in and was confused by the title because it's confusing. It's still confusing. That's what they would do in Nepal, right? I think that's what Mason said, or Taekwondo rather. Yes. Didn't you raise your hand? You're pointing to him. You raised your hand. What do you want?
Enlightenment.
You go to the bathroom. You want enlightenment? Okay. All right. So.
Shokubang, does spiritual materialism ever fall apart?
You could say that it does, because we stop fueling that particular engine, stop providing nutrition for it by disagreeing, agreeing, pulling and pushing. But that comes from just seeing what this is, not separate. No matter how it looks, it's not separate. No matter how good it looks, no matter how bad it looks, no matter how you feel, it is not separate. It's not something else. No matter what arises, not separate from the Buddha, not separate from the awakened one, not separate from the Tathagata, not separate from what the person 2,500 years ago, by the name of what it was, Siddhartha Gautama, pointed at through his teaching. Not separate from that. Not something to believe in, not something to disbelieve. The intention to see that.
Question from Adriana in Kalamazoo.
Adriana,
What is self-pity?
it's pretty miserable. Do that thinking that I think you probably already know, or you wouldn't ask the question what it is as far as the description of it. But it's just another form of ego. It's less obvious. Someone can have self-pity and it wouldn't necessarily show up so much to others. Whereas pride shows up quite a bit. Even shame might show up, but self-pity, just feeling sorry for ourselves that we're got a bad break, we're not getting anywhere, we were not given all of the benefits that others are given, or no matter what we do, things just seem to get worse. We start to feel sorry for ourselves. Just another form of self-centeredness, of keeping that ego mind, that belief that there is someone who's wrong, who can't get anywhere, who's a failure, and actually buying into that as someone, rather than seeing that the feeling of self-pity is dependently risen, and there's no one who's feeling that. There's no personhood there. That's probably going to take some mind training or a spiritual path of intention to fundamentally see what that is, rather than go in and try to stop feeling that way. That to stop feeling good, stop feeling bad, stop, no matter what it is. Any intention to control or manipulate or stop some things and start other things is just relative truth. It works for a while, but it won't last. It's impermanent. Should we close, or are we at the end?
9:15.
Okay, we can close then. Is there a final question? I can take maybe one more if there is. Very good. Let's close.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho San Chi Shifu Shison Bu San Moko San Moko the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.